Welcome to the Green Party's Interstate Webinar Series. This webinar is being sponsored specifically by the Green Party Peace Action Committee. And this committee exists within the Green Party to facilitate the planning and achievement of peace and justice actions proposals to support and promote the Green Party's anti-war candidates and agenda. My name is Rita Jacobs, and I will be the moderator for this evening. Our topic tonight is War Comes Home, Dissent and Repression in the U.S. We think we have the best spokespersons for dissent discussion on our panel tonight, and are looking forward to hearing and learning from their presentations. Each panelist will speak for 8 minutes or less. Following the presentations, we will have some comments from others who have requested to speak for 2 minutes each. With one exception, we will have a speaker from Stop Cop City who will speak for 3 or 4 minutes. I am honored to moderate this discussion and raise awareness of the government repression of dissenting views against its acts of aggression and injustice. Some of this repression has been going on for a long time in the form of censorship by the government. Recent information about censorship included actions by the CIA, the NSA, the FBI, Department of Defense, Department of Justice, and the Global Engagement Center and Agency of the State Department. These agencies carry out censorship by using the social media platforms as their agents, and their actions are now being litigated in federal court as violations of the First Amendment. Former officers of some of these government agencies, together with military officers, bankers, and corporate directors, also populate the many think tanks that influence foreign policy of the government. Generally, financial gain and support for the monopoly corporations are at the core of the recommendations made by these think tanks. Wealthy banks control both corporations and the government and use them as tools to retain wealth and control for financial gain. In order to stop repression and maintain peace, this control by the wealthy needs to be stopped. This repression is part of their class war. Our first speaker for tonight is Akile Anayi. Akile is the Director of the Department of Agitation and Propaganda of the African People's Socialist Party, guiding a multi-platform media operation that delivers an African internationalist analysis to the issues and events impacting the Black working class in the U.S. and around the world through newsprint, FM and online radio stations, book publishing, and social media. And so I now welcome Akile. The floor is yours.
Rita, and I really want to appreciate the invitation from the Green Party Peace Action Committee as well for conducting this event. And before I start, I just want to express on behalf of the African People's Socialist Party our absolute outright condemnation of the attacks and indictments that have come down today on our comrades and organizers with Stop Cop City. And I just really want to appreciate the fact that this discussion is happening, and it's important to recognize that such an effort to have these kind of discussions in light of these attacks being made against the people for daring to struggle, for daring to stand up and fight back, and daring to tell the truth. This is, this session itself is what they would characterize as spreading dissent or something to that nature. But the fact is that we are addressing the elephant in the room, which is the truth. And the fact that this system built on genocide, slavery, colonialism, theft, rape cannot stand up to its truth. And our responsibility is to stand up to it. And as stated, I'm representing the African People's Socialist Party, which, as most of you may know, was attacked by the U.S. government with the state apparatus in the form of the FBI on July 29th of last year in a multi-city military-style pre-dawn raids. The leader and founder of this organization, Chairman Amali Ishitela, was confronted with laser-mounted assault rifles. His front windows of his home were shattered with flashbang grenades. His wife and leading member of the African People's Socialist Party, Ona Zane, was nearly hit in the head with a drone. They were handcuffed and zip tied at 5 o'clock in the morning in St. Louis, Missouri. They were doing similar things to comrades across town in St. Louis and in St. Petersburg, Florida, where we have some of our offices, and it's also where I'm located. They stole laptops, cell phones, archives, paper records, and justified themselves with an absurd and completely fabricated and bogus charge of working as some kind of agent or employee for the Russian government. And we were waiting for indictments to come down, which came almost a year later on April 18th of this year. So they said that because part of what they've alleged in this indictment, that they said that because the chairman spoke in Russia and that serves as evidence. Well, he's spoken and carried the same exact message and position, which was said just now, African internationalism, the theory he founded. He's brought that theory, this position all around the world, in Ireland, in London, in Germany, in Spain, in Nicaragua, in Jamaica, South Africa. Everywhere the chairman could bring this message to unite people to the African Revolution, to the freedom struggle, the chairman has gone there. And so he's not being accused of being an agent for any of these countries, but they're saying because he traveled to Russia, that's evidence. They said our electoral campaigns, where I ran for office, where Comrade Jesse Neville, who's one of the indicted Uhuru 3, where we ran for office on a platform of reparations for the first time in this country, that happened. They said that is evidence for their claims. They say that our analysis about the Russia-Ukraine war is evidence for our claims. And in this analysis that we've had with every imperialist war, we've called it out, we've called it what it is. This is a war, an imperialist war being made to be able to seize the resources, the land, and the whole historic assault that these powers have made, these colonial powers have made on the peoples of the world. It's nothing new. And what we see happening with Russia and Ukraine, it's nothing new. And we put that analysis out. They said this is evidence because we don't have the same analysis as Joe Biden and the Department of Justice around this question. So we say that their accusations is evidence of the fact that this is a purely political assault on the African liberation movement, which this government has never ceased since the war it initiated on the Garvey movement, with the civil rights movement, and its leaders with W.E.B. Du Bois, Paul Robeson faced the same kind of accusations, and also with the Black Revolution itself, and which reached a peak in the 1960s. They say our activity promotes, quote unquote, dissent. And this is an interesting concept because not only is promoting dissent a scary way of saying expressing opposing views, it's also supposed to be constitutionally protected activity. You're supposed to be able to say something even if they don't agree with it. The Constitution says you have a right to say something that people don't agree with. They don't characterize their own activity as promoting dissent. So it wasn't that a bunch of people suddenly woke up and became clear about what this system really is when they murdered George Floyd in 2020. No, that's not activity that promotes dissent. When they kill and gun down Black people in this country, that's not enough. No, they say what we do is promoting dissent. What we do in calling what this is and saying what the truth is, they say this is dissent. So just the other day, I don't know if people have seen, but these self-proclaimed Nazis called themselves demonstrating outside of an amusement park, Disney. People should be familiar with it outside, but I didn't hear anything about pre-dawn raids being made against any of these people. And that would assume that such white nationalist demonstrations don't represent actually dissent in US ideology and practice. So they don't attack these forces who call themselves Nazis and who march down the streets with swastikas, but they would, so that's not promoting dissent, again, which assumes the philosophy and ideology of this country here. So beyond this, and I'm gonna move to wrap, it's important to understand that the African People's Socialist Party was founded during a period of intense political repression, counterinsurgency war that assassinated our leaders, that this government has never had to answer to. Nobody is in prison for the murders and assassinations of our leaders in the Black Panther Party and the Black Revolution of the 1960s. When they destabilized our organization, they imprisoned our leaders, where there are forces right now, political prisoners inside a prison today, lamenting in prisons today from that assault of the 1960s. This movement was forged in the midst of a war that was already happening at quote unquote home, a war against African people in this country who were struggling to be free. That war has never ended, which is what we must understand about the attack on the party. The party has been out front since this period, working to reunite this anti-colonial and freedom-loving forces on a common trajectory. This is what the government is attacking. How can a slave not have dissenting views against the slave master? It is ridiculous to expect the colonized and exploited would share the same outlook and vision as the colonizer. We don't, we can't. For us as African people, as colonized people, our freedom is viewed as dissent. Our just struggle for democracy and self-determination can be regarded as illegal activity at the point it threatens the stability and class peace experienced by the colonial powers. That's why we were attacked, because the party has been out front around this question, has never surrendered. The future of Africa and African people has never backed down despite all of the attacks we've ever come up against, just like we didn't back down after July 29th of 2022, because the world is changing and those who are in power, the colonial powers that have maintained, this order over the entire world for centuries, that order is coming undone. And the party, the Uhuru movement, Chairman Amalia Shitela, and the philosophy of African internationalism can, have been said to have provided that analysis and has provided the ability to actually change the world. And so we call on people in this meeting, everybody who's listening, because we have to understand what this attack is about, and that if they are able to successfully take away the right of freedom of speech of Chairman Amalia Shitela, they have closed the door on the question of freedom of speech for everyone. So even if you don't agree
Sorry
with
for the interruption, you have 2 minutes left.
2 minutes, thank you. So even if you don't agree with everything I've said up to now, the fact is, do we have the right to say this? And will we stand up against the US government who's threatening our right to say this, because they attacked the Black revolution first. They attacked Black people first to get to this core demand here, the whole constitutional right to freedom of speech. It will be taken away from you if we cannot unite with Chairman Amalia Shitela's right to be able to express this and to be able to advocate and organize for the freedom of African people. So we want people to unite with the demand to drop the charges against the Uhuru Three, including Jesse Neville and Penny Hess with the Solidarity Movement. And we want people to support the Black community's right to free speech. We want people to demand hands off Uhuru, hands off Africa. That's your demand. And take this message to the White House with us on November 4th of this year at the Black People's March on the White House, which you can learn more about at handsoffuhuru.org. I want to close by saying all power to the people and Black power to the African nation. Uhuru, thank you.
Thank you very much, Akile. Definitely, I'm sure that all of us here support the problems that you're facing, and agree with the fact that we must preserve our First Amendment rights of speech and not be persecuted for that. Thank you. And our next speaker is a journalist, Jeremy Kuzmarov, the managing editor of Covert Action magazine. And Jeremy has a broad editorial responsibility for Covert Action magazine, including editing, fact-checking, and also writes original content. He's covered U.S. foreign policy and covert operations since 1974, and also taught at numerous universities and college in the field of U.S. history and foreign relations. So the floor is yours, Jeremy.
Okay, well, thank you very much for having me. And Akila, you're welcome to write for our magazine. We did a few articles about the outrageous attack on your movement. Covert Action was founded by CIA whistleblower Philip Agee in the 1970s to expose CIA covert operations. And I think one of those major covert operations, what we're living through on a daily basis, is the infiltration of the media and other institutions, including higher education. And, William Casey said in the 1980s, we'll be successful when everything the American public believe is a lie. And, I think they've been successful. I mean, American believed in Russiagate. They drank the Kool-Aid about COVID. They drank the Kool-Aid about Ukraine. Maybe now it's starting to, people are starting to question, because it's clear that this is a quagmire, and the U.S. cannot win. The U.S. side is not going anywhere. It's counteroffensive was a complete dud. So common Americans are starting to question the where their taxpayer dollar is going, and more information is coming to light. I mean, they had a hard time hiding the neo-Nazi nature of the Ukrainian government. Oh, something, yes. I mean, they had to, it was amazing to see the contortions that, the New York Times is reporting, oh, yes, they're neo-Nazis, and this presents an image problem or something. So, I mean, they pretty much had to acknowledge that these are neo-Nazis. So, I mean, sometimes there's a time lag, and eventually people wake up. But I mean, it's an illusion. I think people here, are conscious of all this, that it's an illusion that there's a free media. I mean, outlets like Covert Action, we struggle to get an audience, and I mean, we're shadow banned, and it's very difficult to penetrate anywhere into the mainstream. I mean, I'm a historian, so I can look at it in historical context. I mean, one comparison, I mean, I think, well, war and democracy really, war is a great destroyer of democracy, and so is empire. And I think numerous writers have pointed out that you can't really have an empire and a democracy. And I mean, that's what we're seeing. We're seeing the repressive techniques come home, like what Akile was describing. I mean, the way people are treated in U.S. Countries subjected to U.S. Military invasion is the way that Black people are being treated or have been treated for a long time here. Domestically, we're seeing a ratcheting up of repression as this empire goes into overdrive in places like Ukraine. Today it's Ukraine. Next, it may be Taiwan and China, and another war in Southeast Asia. That would obviously be a cataclysm. And I mean, as far as freedom, the topic of censorship, I mean, we've been living through that. I mean, one area, unfortunately, a lot of activism, because I used to be part of a group called Historians Against the War, and they have a whole campaign, against what the Republicans are trying to do in education, the banning of books. And I mean, I support that. I mean, I don't like banning books, and some of what the Republicans are doing, like trying to cut the teaching of critical race studies or African American history, is obviously terrible. But they're ignoring. I mean, the area of censorship is also in a critical study. I mean, they're talking about banning books like about lesbianism on campus, but I mean, like I wrote a book critical of U.S. Policy toward Russia going back 100 years, and provides a historical analysis, and that actually looks at a period in the 19th century when the U.S. had good relations with Russia, and that was kind of visionary policy of Abraham Lincoln. And that got lost in the Russian Revolution when the U.S. invaded Russia, and there have been poisonous relations ever since. But my book is never stocked in any library. It's never reviewed in any newspaper. Nobody knows about the book. So I mean, that's a form of censorship too. They marginalize and isolate people who provide critical analysis of U.S. foreign policy, even if it's very detailed historical studies, and even has a positive message that looks at some past American leaders in a positive way as a potential model, for social movements, but they don't want that discussed in any school. So, I don't know what you call that, because, I've never been threatened or attacked, but my book, will get no airing anywhere. It's never stocked in any library. It's never taught to any student. That's a form of censorship where they marginalize or just isolate any critical intellectual, especially who are writing on certain topics, U.S. foreign policy. We've seen that with the COVID. I mean, historically, I think we can draw a parallel to the McCarthy era. We're seeing, a new COINTELPRO. We're seeing McCarthy-style attacks on intellectuals. I did a piece on Robert Kennedy and how the media repeatedly attacked him and didn't feign any, objectivity. And you can debate some of his policies and positions, but the way he's presenting the media, this conspiracy theorist, And and that word is constantly used. Every time his name is mentioned in the media, he's branded a conspiracy theorist as if he's crazy. And that, to get back to my original point about the CIA and their
Oh, Jeremy, you muted yourself, or someone, you need to unmute.
I'm gonna butt in here. I didn't, if I
Okay,
did,
sorry, I'm back. So I don't know what you missed, but I don't
can
know
I
how
just,
that happened, but
Just probably
guys,
the last
can I
sentence or
butt in
so.
just a moment? I'm sorry, this is the
okay.
moderator. This is the moderator. There's a lot of stuff going on in the background, a lot of feedback and stuff. If you're not speaking, if you could please mute yourself. Speaker can unmute. You should be able to do that on your own, or if you have to unmute for some reason, but otherwise all others, if you would mute. I can't mute all without muting the speaker, but if people would go ahead and mute yourselves, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay,
I'm
so
sorry to hear
yeah, and my point is that I think groups on the left, like the Green Party, and other groups, I think the left has lost their way. They failed to understand how the CIA has really taken control over society, and stifled free speech and promoted psychological warfare operations on the American public. And the left, should unify against that, and for free media instead of subscribing to some of the narratives they advance. And one is, the conspiracy theory narrative. And the CIA, following the John F. Kennedy assassination, the CIA issued a memo that said, label anybody who questioned the Warren report, which we know is a fraud. We know that Lee Harvey Oswald was not the lone assassin. In fact, I don't believe he was the assassin at all. That was a CIA operation to kill Kennedy, along with Texas oil interests and Lyndon Johnson. But anybody who raised that point was smeared as a conspiracy theorist. And there was a memo that said, attack them as a conspiracy theorist and denigrate them and stifle debate. And they followed that formula ever since. Anybody questions something, whether it's the COVID narrative, whether it's the 9/11, whether it's the Ukraine, or they really probe deeply into corruption in the government or in the CIA, they're smeared as a conspiracy theorist, or they're just isolated and ignored. And we're seeing that with Kennedy. They can't totally ignore him, so they're using that CIA formula of smearing him as a conspiracy theorist. And it sideswipes any debate, like about his book, which I read, which is a very detailed study on the real Anthony Fauci. They don't want people actually debating the facts in his book. They just want to think of him as some kind of a kook and conspiracy nut.
Excuse my interruption, but you have 2 minutes to wrap up your thoughts.
Okay, so that maybe is what tied it together, is that, yeah, I mean, there is a pattern of repression going back well over 100 years of dissenting groups and control over the media. Anytime the U.S. is at war, we see this uniform chorus in support of the war and the attempt to denigrate anti-war dissenters. And that goes back, you could look at the period of World War I and how they jailed Eugene Debs and the Wobblies. You can look at the McCarthy era and how they branded any anti-war activists as communists. And then you have the CIA that has become ever more powerful and controlling of the media, and uses, they have their techniques, and one is to label any dissenter as a conspiracy theory. So a conspiracy theorist. So groups on the left, I think, should mobilize against that, and should not subscribe to that kind of narrative that would demonize people like Kennedy and not debate his points. And unfortunately, I've been in left-wing circles where they subscribe to the same worldview that the CIA wants you to subscribe. They say, oh, anybody who question 9/11, that was not an inside job, and you're a nut if you think that. And they isolate you, and we see that in program like Democracy Now! Never has any guests who've researched 9/11 or the COVID who question the narrative, and that's wrong, and that may reflect CIA infiltration even in alternative media. So this is something groups on the left should be attuned to and mobilize against. And hopefully our magazine, you guys can support us. We're looking for new writers. And if you could subscribe to our magazine, hopefully we could be a voice for an independent left that really tackles the corruption and repression that Achille was pointing to, and helps contribute to the regeneration of left-wing movements that are strong enough to withstand the repression that they may face. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jeremy. And I only want to say that, I actually read a lot of the articles in Covert Action magazine, and I've actually had one published there.
Yes.
And it's a great outlet and place to place articles that, of course, the mainstream media would never touch. And I agree that we're back in an era of some kind of McCarthyism and and definitely repression of people like Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who is trying to get through some truth to the American people. And I certainly applaud all the efforts that are going in that direction. So thank you again, Jeremy. And our next speaker is Diego Mata. And he will have a translator working with him. I'm not sure how they're going to handle that, but we'll see. And he will have additional time to speak because of his use of a translator. A recent coup engineered by the elite in Peru together with the US resulted in the democratically elected president Pedro Castillo being put in jail. The people of Peru, especially the campesinos and indigenous, are fighting very hard for his release. And Diego Mata is an attorney and a member of the leadership of the organization Izquierda Socialista de Peru. Is also a neighborhood leader in the district of Caraballo, Lima, and member of the National Committee for the Unification of the Struggle of Peru. And I will turn this over probably to his translator, and I think we have Pamela here.
We
okay.
do, but Rita, I don't know that she feels confident enough to do this. So I'm wondering if there's anyone in the audience. We could also wait until just before 9 o'clock. When another translator will be here. But if there's anyone in the audience who can translate from Spanish to English, speak up. It looks like nobody who can. So can we go back to Diego? And I mean, I'm not going to be able to do a really good job, but I can try. We had two people lined up, and one hasn't shown up, and the other just can't is too nervous to do it.
Okay. So do you want us to maybe wait until the other person shows up, perhaps?
Yes, I think that would be best.
Shall we go on and?
Yes. Oh wait, who said somebody said they could try. Hold on.
Okay.
Who's that? I can't read. I can't.
Hello, it's
Mary
me.
Anderson.
Okay.
Hello.
Oh, Mary. Hi.
Okay.
Hi,
Yeah.
Buenas noches, Diego. Si quiere usted, yo intentaré interpretar por usted, pero no tengo garantías de que voy a poderlo hacer muy bien. I just introduced myself and told him that if he's willing, I'll try.
Okay. Fine.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you.
So he can go ahead and start speaking, and Mary can translate. So I don't know if you do this, paragraph by paragraph, perhaps?
Yeah.
Y adelante, Diego, usted ha trabajado con intérpretes anteriormente, asking if he's worked with interpreters before. Sí, un pensamiento o dos y luego yo lo digo. ¿Le parece?
Bien, de acuerdo.
Okay.
Muchas gracias por el esfuerzo.
¿Cómo no? Thank you.
Ok, comenzamos entonces.
Good evening.
Buenas noches. Muchísimas gracias por la invitación. Mi nombre es Diego Mota y quisiera presentar lo siguiente.
Good evening. Many thanks for the invitation. My name is Diego Mota, and I want to say the following.
Es sobre la crisis que vive el Perú y la lucha de clases que se da en mi país.
About the crisis that Peru is in and the class struggle that my country is living through.
Es necesario saber que en el Perú se produjo una expansión, un ciclo de expansión capitalista del 2003 al 2013, producto del incremento de los precios de los minerales a nivel mundial.
It's important to know that between 2003 and 2013, Peru lived through a huge capitalist expansion because of increasing mineral prices on the world markets.
Ese crecimiento de la economía lo que hizo fue profundizar el modelo económico neoliberal, elevando las ganancias a la burguesía, pero minorando los ingresos de los sectores más bajos, más populares.
What that economic expansion seemed to do was to strengthen economically the upper classes, the liberal classes, while ignoring the people on the bottom ranks.
Esto funcionó así. Se impulsaron muchos proyectos mineros y petroleros para satisfacer la demanda de minerales a nivel internacional. Y esto chocó con las formas de producción y de vida de las organizaciones campesinas y los pueblos originarios en el Perú.
¿Y los pueblos qué? ¿Vecindarios?
Originarios, los pueblos originarios.
Yes, gracias. So it worked this way. There were so many mining and oil drilling projects that ran up against the interests of the country people, campesinos, and the indigenous people.
Estos pueblos sufrieron mucho con la contaminación ambiental y el robo de sus tierras.
These communities suffered tremendously with contamination, environmental contamination, and with their lands being stolen. Siga.
Entre el 2003 y el 2013 hubieron varios levantamientos populares, pero focalizados en determinadas regiones. No fueron a nivel nacional, sino solo en algunos lugares específicos en contra de las actividades mineras internacionales.
Between 2003 and 2013, there were a lot of uprisings, but they never became national uprisings. They were regional, resisting, confronting particular mining projects in particular regions.
Cuando el ciclo de expansión capitalista en 2013 se frenó en el Perú, los precios de los minerales bajaron y se originó una crisis económica.
In 2013, when international metals prices and resource prices dropped, the economic bubble burst and there was general
Eso
suffering.
significó
Bien, pues,
Eso significó un conflicto también dentro de la burguesía, dentro de las derechas, por ver cómo se repartían la torta que cada vez era más pequeña.
This also created conflict within the bourgeois right-wing crowds to divide up the little pie that was left after the bubble burst. Am I being clear? Is this good enough, or would you rather wait for a real interpreter? It's okay, all right.
No, you're
sigamos.
doing fine,
Y
Mary.
se creó,
Y se creó.
ok, y a partir del 2016 se se originó una crisis política muy fuerte. Tuvimos 6 presidentes en 5 años.
And starting in 2016, because of all that background, we went into a serious political crisis. We had 6 presidents in 5 years.
La izquierda ha tenido 2 respuestas frente a eso.
The left has had 2 responses to this situation.
Un sector de la izquierda más ligado a la clase media y sobre todo en la ciudad de Lima, que es la capital, se dedicó a apoyar a un sector de la derecha en contra de otro sector de la derecha.
One part of the left who leans kind of towards the middle class and who lives in the capital city, urban left, they got busy supporting one section of the right-wingers against another section of the right-wingers who were all fighting over the pie.
Mientras se fue gestando una izquierda más popular desde los sectores campesinos y de los pueblos originarios.
At the same time, there was a more serious left response developing among the campesinos, the country people, and the indigenous, but slower developing.
El 2021, contra todo pronóstico, contra toda expectativa, gana las elecciones presidenciales el profesor Pedro Castillo.
Oh, in 2021, against all the odds, a leftist candidate, Professor Pedro Castillo, won the election, surprising everyone.
Pedro Castillo era un campesino, maestro de la zona rural, sindicalista y representante de los sectores pobres.
He was a teacher in a rural school, a labor organizer, and a representative. ¿Y un representante de quién?
De los sectores más pobres.
And represented the poorest demographics in the country. Siga.
Pedro Castillo gobernó contra toda la derecha. La derecha constantemente lo boicoteó y lo atacó.
Mary, you're muted. I don't know what happened there.
I'm sorry. He tried, I've got a notebook on my keyboard. He tried to make a government that would represent the poor people and against the rich people. And of course, they viciously and constantly attacked him. Siga.
El 7 de diciembre del 2022, el Congreso de mayoría absoluta de la derecha, en alianza con el Ministerio Público y las Fuerzas Armadas, dieron un golpe de Estado contra Pedro Castillo.
En December 2022. Ay, qué pena, disculpe, ¿lo puede decir de nuevo? I'm asking him to repeat it because I got distracted.
Claro, el 7 de diciembre del 2022, las Fuerzas Armadas, el Congreso de la República, el Ministerio Público, dieron un golpe de Estado contra Pedro Castillo.
Oh, okay. On the 7th of December, 2022, the armed forces, the Congress, and I don't know what this means, the public ministry, all together created a coup against President Castillo.
Ese mismo día, el pueblo, sobre todo de las regiones más alejadas del país, específicamente el sur del país, se levantaron, salieron a protestar.
That same day, the rural people, especially the most far away from the capital, especially in the south, the rural people were up in arms. Now, in arms, armados o no armados, were uprising, having an uprising.
Salieron a protestar de manera pacífica, pero la respuesta por parte del gobierno usurpador fue absolutamente represiva. A la fecha hay más de 70 asesinados por parte de esta dictadura.
The uprisings were a peaceful response to the coup, but the response of the armed services against the peasants was brutal. And that's been 6 months now. There have been at least 70 assassinations of the people who are protesting the coup.
Los reclamos del pueblo han sido para que se vaya la dictadura de Dina Boluarte, para que se cierre el Congreso de la República, para que se convoque a una asamblea popular constituyente y se respete el voto popular, es decir, que se restituya y libere a Pedro Castillo, quien se encuentra preso.
Okay, the demands of the people in uprising are that this current president, Duarte, should go, that the Congress should be closed, that there should be convened a popular assembly so that an actual vote can be legitimized again, and that President Castillo should be freed from prison.
Pardon me interruption. You have 2 minutes to finish your thoughts.
2 minutos.
Ok. Sin embargo, la dictadura no ha cedido. El gobierno dictatorial de Dina Boluarte cuenta con el apoyo de los Estados Unidos y actualmente han enviado a más de 1,000 miembros de las Fuerzas Armadas estadounidenses a Perú para que entrenen a las tropas militares y policiales peruanas para reprimir al pueblo.
However, the dictator has no intention of stepping down. She counts on United States support. So far, more than 1,000 US Army people have gone there to train Peruvian forces. And so the dictatorship is still in place and feeling strong.
El gobierno de Estados Unidos ha estado también impulsando el golpe de Estado y soportando a este gobierno dictador.
The US government has actually helped to provoke the coup and has given strong support to this dictator's government.
Lo que
Ok.
hemos visto en el Perú, para terminar, lo que hemos visto en estos últimos meses en el Perú ha sido el levantamiento popular más grande que ha habido en las últimas décadas. Ya no solamente son reclamos aislados, sino que es todo el Perú el que está levantado. Este gobierno solo se sostiene con la fuerza de las armas.
And to finish my remarks, so in Peru, what we have seen now is the biggest uprising now nationwide, the biggest thing that we have seen in decades. And let's see, the biggest thing we've seen in decades. Y el último punto fue?
El El gobierno solo se sostiene
Ah.
por las fuerzas de las armas.
And the only thing that's holding the government up is the armed forces.
Okay.
Necesitamos del apoyo de todo el mundo para derrocar esta dictadura. Muchas gracias.
We need support from all over the world to knock down this dictator. Muchas
Okay.
gracias, Diego.
Okay.
Gracias.
I thank Diego very much for his participation here. And certainly, we that are here do not approve of our government interfering in other countries, and hope that they can solve their problems there, and have a democratic government reelected.
Dice
So,
Rita que le agradecemos su presencia y su presentación y que por supuesto los que estamos aquí presentes no queremos que nuestro gobierno se esté metiendo en los otros países y que tenemos esperanzas. Ojalá ustedes puedan recuperar su democracia.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you.
okay, thank you, Mary, also for
Welcome.
helping us out. Good job.
Very welcome. Thank you.
Okay. Our next speaker is Kiana Jones. And Kiana is a political and social justice activist and community organizer who is a staunch advocate for quality, affordable childcare and equity in education. She currently works with the community movement builders to educate, engage, and empower the Black community in Atlanta, Georgia. She's an ordained minister and proprietor of E=MC² Educational Services, LLC, where she works as a homeschool curriculum consultant and an individualized education plan advocate and German translator. Anna is the wife of Jared Moore and mother to their 5 unique and extraordinary children. So, Anna, we're
Good
anxious
evening,
to hear from you.
Uhuru, thank you so much for having me on. I want to say thank you to Akile for standing in solidarity with us here in Atlanta, as we certainly stand in solidarity with the Uhuru 3, with chairman, with everyone who is being oppressed and repressed by our government for simply speaking out and resisting colonial capitalism. There is so much that could be said, but literally Akile has said so much that needed to be said and that I would have said. So I won't even go back over some of those things. And I'll start with where we are right here in the movement against Cop City. Yesterday, we had RICO charges that were announced against 61 activists against Cop City. RICO charges that are so flimsy that the Attorney General got onto a press conference and literally admitted that under Georgia statute, you do not have to even be acquainted with each other to be found, for them to deem you a member of a racketeer influenced criminal organization. What I find is the same thing that Akile impressed upon us earlier. Every time we decide to speak up, we are hit with backlash. Every time we decide to say we will not accept what this government is dishing out, when we actually seek to use those democratic tools that we are supposedly guaranteed under this Constitution, we are put down. And those are the exact words of Attorney General Chris Carr, that this government in the state of Georgia would put down any opposition to Cop City. Why? Because Cop City is the living, breathing embodiment of police terror, of U.S. militarization, of state-sanctioned violence, of the oppression of all people who are not a part of the 1%. They are using the militarization of police to further the goal of racialized capitalism, which is to protect private property and to perpetuate a class system that seeks to keep one group of people oppressed while elevating another. When we look at our movement to stop Cop City, it is so dangerous right now because we have brought together everyone under this umbrella of intersectionality, people who are very concerned about the environment, people who are concerned about economic justice, people who are concerned about racial justice, reproductive justice, LGBTQIA+ rights. We are concerned about education, and we are concerned about how it is that we live together in community to get resources. People from all walks of life who this government never thought would hold hands together are doing just that in the movement to stop Cop City. And what's even more incumbent upon them is that they have to realize and contend with the fact that it's not just in Atlanta. This is a national movement and an international movement. We have people who are in Germany who are saying stop Cop City. We have people across the pond who are saying stop Cop City. We have people all over these yet to be United States who are saying stop Cop City because Cop City is a model. Cop City is a symbol of repression. And what we see as listed in the indictment that came out yesterday, the date that sparked it all, May 25th, 2020, the date that George Floyd was murdered, the date that predates any movement against Cop City, but it was a date that people across this country decided to mobilize and say, you know what, we are not going to take it anymore. We will not stand for this implicit police terror. We will not stand for the implicit bias that is exacted against the Black community by police. We will not stand for police officers to break the law and constantly get away with it. We won't stand for traffic stops to continue to account for the majority of police encounters, but always lead to, in majority cases, the death of Black people. Why is this happening here in the United States? Why is this happening when US imperialism abroad is now being shadowed right here in these United States? When we see the way the US deals with Israel as it relates to Palestine, this is what we see in the repression of our movements. This is what we see when they seek to criminalize dissent. We can no longer accept a white nationalist Zionist view of this world because the United States is not the end all be all. We don't have any business meddling in other countries' affairs. We don't have a right in this country to tell people that they can't disagree with government. We don't. And even though Attorney General Chris Carr here in Georgia and also Governor Brian Kemp, Mayor Andre Dickens in the city of Atlanta would like for people to believe that it's criminal to go against the government, we know that that's just not the truth. At the end of the day, there is a constitution that supposedly governs this country that I know was never written with me in mind. When we look to the rule of law, as Akile said, colonial law is the rule of law. When the oppressed rise up against the oppressors, there is always going to be an issue. When it comes to dissent, there can be no peace. This is what people so often mistake when they talk about social justice and racial justice movements, and they say, oh, we just need peaceful protests. Protest is not peaceful. There can be no peace when you are seeking to disrupt the very system that has been in place for ages and ages that has propelled one group of people over another. There is no peace. They don't see that as peace. So while we can be sitting arm in arm and singing songs while doing nothing else, that is not seen as peaceful. What that is seen as is a direct disruption of the status quo. And that is not what this government wants in the United States. That is not what Democrats want. That's not what Republicans want. That is not what the governing body in this country wants. So what we see is that when we do voice our dissent, when we put that dissent into action, we are criminalized. And the language about outside agitators, about domestic terrorism, this language has been used way back to the beginning of abolition. Supposedly it was outside agitators that did not want slavery.
Yeah, my apologies. You have 2 minutes to finish up your thoughts.
Supposedly it was outside agitators that wanted the civil rights movement. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who so many people love to invoke the name of, was called an outside agitator. When we look at movements throughout history, we see the narrative of outside agitation, and then we also see that the government itself deliberately places people inside movements to sabotage. When you look at the fact that during 2020, there were so many incidences where so-called protesters were arrested that turned out to be government operatives. This government is not interested in our freedom. We have to take it and make it for ourselves. The only thing that I can say to people is that we can't stop now, because what we see right now is that we have them on the run. They are so afraid of the solidarity in the movement, the global movement at large. This government doesn't want to see me on a Green Party webinar right now. This government doesn't want to see me stand with my indigenous relatives at the Mountain Valley Pipeline. This government doesn't want to see me stand with environmental justice activists, knowing that environmental justice is racial justice. We have successfully connected the dots. And now that people have come into the knowledge of where we really are and what it's going to take, this government is running scared because they know that we have the power to do it.
Thank you very much, Kiana. And I find the actions of the government there in Atlanta to be absolutely atrocious. I don't have a better way to express my dislike of what's going on there. And certainly a lot of people are behind you and are in your court, and hope that everything improves there and that we can do away with Cobb City. Thank you. And so our next speaker is Sherry Hankala. And Sherry is a nationally renowned advocate for the poor and homeless and is the founder of the Poor People's Army. A Green Party vice president candidate in 2012, Hankala was one of the 13 individuals named most in danger doing frontline work in the U.S. She has spoken at universities, organizations, and conferences across the world, often speaks about human rights, taking over abandoned houses for shelter, and the nonprofit industrial complex and civil disobedience, among other topics. And so I will turn the floor over to Sherry. Go ahead.
Thank you for inviting me to this webinar. It's an incredibly important one. It's sometimes the one I want to like duck my head because it's a hard topic to talk about. I get up every morning and I thank the higher powers that I'm not in the penitentiary. The Poor People's Economic Human Rights Campaign, the Kensington Welfare Rights Union, and now what we're calling the Poor People's Army has been teaching people how to reclaim abandoned government-owned properties and house people in this country. We've worked with guerrilla cartographers who have mapped out the entire country, and we've learned that there's more abandoned houses every single place across this country than there are homeless people. I've been busy housing people, and we're also the ones that have been responsible for organizing the largest marches against both the Republican and the Democratic national conventions, going all the way back until the year 2004. And when I was found in most danger along with Lynn Stewart and some folks from the Immokalee Farm Workers and others as being in most danger doing human rights work in this country, I really had to ask, what is it that I'm doing that is so incredibly dangerous? And I think that dangerous thing is that we as poor and homeless people in this country have really been getting organized from below in massive ways and reclaiming the basic necessities of life. So you'll never see us on, the cover of Time magazine or on CNN or anything like that, I wake up every morning here in Kensington. There's helicopters. I was concerned that you guys were going to hear the police outside on my street, outside the door here. We have more people that have died as a result of the opiate crisis than died in Vietnam. So it's just a normal thing. If anybody wants to Google Kensington, you could see the visuals of what I see every day of my life. It's a war that we didn't ask for, and that we have to fight every single day in this community. The veterans that we've invited and given reality tours just cannot believe that we are surviving this situation that we face on a regular basis. But in terms of dissent, I now have over 200 some arrests, and we redid the March of Dr. Martin Luther King a couple of years ago after Hurricane Maria hit in Puerto Rico, and hundreds of families were displaced, and Housing and Urban Development wasn't doing anything about it. So we held a sit-in in Housing and Urban Development, and most people are just given citations. I was charged with a misdemeanor, had a full jury trial by just, having a sit-in in a federal government building where you supposedly that's the last thing that you have is your voice to go voice your concerns when so many people are becoming homeless. And I was found guilty. The deal that they wanted is they wanted to make a deal with me, a stay away order from properties owned by Housing and Urban Development. And of course, I couldn't agree with the stay away order. The case is now being appealed. There's a great group of First Amendment lawyers in Washington, D.C. that have taken the case. And so I want to encourage people to continue to follow and watch that. And I'm sure that most of you, even though you're Green Party members, you might not know, what happened to Jill and I. I was excited that she would pick somebody from the bottom to be her running mate. And, when we tried to be a part of the presidential debates, we were handcuffed to chairs all night long. Nobody in our families knew where we were. We were taken by Secret Service, and we weren't able to be part of the presidential debates, even though 80% of the country was able to vote for us, and we were on ballots. And so that gets to be a pretty scary thing. You must be doing something quite interesting that your government would go to that extent to make you disappear, even though millions of dollars had been put to put you on ballots across the entire country. And so, I mean, this is a topic I could go on and on about for hours, but I'm very concerned with the amount of nonprofits in this country right now that are serving as fronts for soft money, really for the two corporate parties in this country. And because we're speaking out so much about it, we've really suffered the consequences. The freezing of accounts, the funding and resources that we should have received, we didn't get. Just the use of DAs in different cities, you name it. We have to do a better job as a party of mapping not just people's, good political rhetoric, whatever, but where's the money coming from? And, what are some of the struggles that are happening from below that our corporate media is making invisible in this country?
Excuse
because
my
I think that they're
interruption. You
quite.
have, yeah, excuse my interruption. You have 2 minutes left to finish up your thoughts.
Yeah, so we want to invite people again to join us. We're daring to be to do it again, even though yeah, we're facing all of this stuff right now. We're marching again on opening day of the Republican National Convention on the Republicans in Wisconsin, and then we're marching on opening day of the Democratic National Convention. They're not happy about it, but we're going to lift up that there has to be some other kind of alternative, and that people that are living on the bottom, no matter how frightening the consequences are, we're going to continue to lift up our voices and make sure that people are housed in this country. So thank you very much for inviting me. I also am from the city of Move, the Move bombing.
Thank you, Sherry, for your comments. And I just wanted to say that we're in the middle of a class war. And certainly everything that's happening now is caused by the fact that the big money is controlling everything that's going on in the country. And the people in this country really need to unite together to fight this problem. And it's too bad that people stay divided because of the, what do I want to say, the media that causes people to dislike one another. Anyway, so let me go on with our program here. I wanted to mention before we go on, we're going to have comments from other people before I get on to that. I wanted to share with you the fact that we will have our next webinar in, I believe, in October. And the title is "There's No Freedom in Silence. Stand Up, Speak Out." And the quotation, "There is no freedom in silence," is by Steve Biko, the South African anti-apartheid activist. And this will be a program put on by the Missouri Green Party, calling for solidarity with the African People's Socialist Party against the military-style FBI attacks, economic sanctions, and bogus charges of being Russian agents. Hear how the Uhuru movement is being targeted by the U.S., why it is imperative that the Green Party and other freedom-loving people defend the right of free speech, and how we can take action in this historic fight. And now we will have a session right now for comments. And these are from endorsing organizations or individuals who may have further information on our topic of repression and dissent. And each speaker will have 2 minutes, with the exception of the person from Cop City, who will have 3 or 4 minutes. So, and we will start with the commenter from Cop City. That would be Cody Bloomfield, the communication director from the organization Defending Rights and Dissent. Cody, wherever you are, go ahead.
Rita, Cody had to leave for an important phone call, so we can
okay, we'll try to come back to him. Will he be
Kiana
back?
or go on to the next one.
Will he be coming back?
No, no.
Oh, okay, okay. Well, that's too bad. I'm sorry about that.
Maybe Kiana would make some additional comments.
I don't know. Kiana, did you have anything further that you'd like to say?
Right now, in the movement to stop Cop City, we are nearing the time that we are going to submit the referendum petition, trying to get a referendum on the ballot for a vote.
Right.
We know that this particular RICO charge that came out yesterday is their last ditch desperate attempt to thwart the referendum process. what we are asking people to do, if they can, is hold solidarity actions all across the country. We've been putting out a lot on social media. You can follow Cop City Vote. You can follow Community Movement Builders, Defend the Atlanta Forest, Stop Cop City, all over Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook even. And what we want people to be aware of is that this particular attack against the referendum is it does not only have implications for the movement to stop Cop City. The Attorney General of the state of Georgia is trying to invalidate all referenda going forward to effectively, completely silence the voice of people when they do not agree with the government. So we need people to just keep spreading the word about what's happening with this ballot referendum, let people know where we are, and to stand in solidarity with us wherever you are and wherever you can.
Okay, thank you. And our next person to comment for 2 minutes is Jesse Nevels. Is Jesse here?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Okay, yes, go ahead.
Thank you so much. And I just want to say Uhuru. My name is Jesse Neville. I'm a member of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, the organization of white people working under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party for reparations to African people and in solidarity with Black Power. And I want to thank the Green Party Peace Action Committee for hosting this event, for hosting this very important discussion tonight, and all of the panelists. I want to salute my leadership, Chairman Omali Shatella and the African People's Socialist Party, and also Akile Anai, one of the leaders of the African People's Socialist Party, who spoke so powerfully earlier tonight in this discussion. And I want to unite with Director Akile's statement of unconditional unity and solidarity with those in Atlanta who are facing these vicious attacks by the government for opposing the militarized police terror against the African community on stolen indigenous land. And I also want to mention that I am one of the Uhuru Three, along with Penny Hess, the chair of the African People's Solidarity Committee, and the main target of the attack on the Uhuru movement, Chairman Omali Shatella. And Chairman Omali Shatella has taught us that in the period that's been referred to in this discussion of McCarthyism in the 1950s, of just an open season of repression against dissent and political speech, the thing that pushed that back, the thing that opened up the democratic space in this country and defeated that effort to just close any kind of ability for people to have a voice was the Black movement, Fannie Lou Hamer, Ella Baker, the civil rights movement, the Black liberation movement. And we are entering a period that bears some resemblance to that period in history. That is why they are going after the African liberation movement, because African people, the African People's Socialist Party, the chairman is in the front. They're the vanguard force for all of us who oppose injustice and oppression and who are fighting for a better world. So they assume that if they can attack Chairman Omali Shatella and take away his freedom of speech, that they can do it to anyone and everyone, and they will. And that is why it is so important that we build this movement to demand hands off the Uhuru movement, hands off Chairman Omali Shatella, drop the charges against the Uhuru Three, and that a victory for Chairman Omali Shatella, for the Uhuru movement, will be a victory for everybody in this country and around the world that is fighting for a better world. So I just want to say that I want to thank the Green Party again, in particular the Green Party in St. Louis, for endorsing the March for Reparations that Uhuru Solidarity Movement is holding on October 21st. The theme of our march is no to FBI war on Black liberation, stop FBI attacks on the Uhuru movement, and drop the charges against the Uhuru Three. And we will also be participating in the March on the White House that the Black is Back Coalition and the Hands Off Uhuru Fight Back Coalition are holding on November 4th to unite all of the struggles of oppressed peoples in defense of their free speech and democratic rights, and to bring an end to this vicious attempt by the US government to silence the voice of the people. So thank you so much. And just want to close again by saying unity through reparations, hands off Uhuru, drop the charges against the Uhuru Three.
Thank you, Jesse. Also, we have Daniel Romano from the St. Louis Greens that is going to comment for us. Daniel?
Okay, thank you. So we've heard about the investigations and indictments against the St. Louis group, the African People's Socialist Party. Actually, they're a national group. Indictments against the Cop City. There is also an active investigation against Code Pink. This is an organization that has opposed U.S. militarism and has advocated for normalization of relations with Cuba and Venezuela and normalization of relations with China. They are being investigated as foreign agents because they received money from a Westerner who happens to live in Shanghai. I mentioned this to show that, you know, this is a widespread repression against dissent in this country. You know, and if we note in the Green Party that it starts with Black activists like the APSP, and as it always has, we support the right of all these organizations to decide the way that we will express our dissent and not have the government decide for us the way that we will dissent against this this kind of widespread repression. And this is why the Missouri Green Party and the Green Party of St. Louis stand and continue to stand in solidarity with the African People's Socialist Party and call for the end to these indictments. And we support all the other groups who are struggling for freedom and for justice. I also want to mention that the Missouri Green Party is hosting a program, There's No Freedom in Silence, which will focus on the attacks on the African People's Socialist Party. It's on Wednesday, October 4th, 7:30 p.m. There is a place you can register at. It is a virtual event, St. Louis reparations.eventbrite.com. I will put that in the comments. We understand that when we see these, this sort of widespread repression, we know that it's, you know, what are called far leftist groups and Black-led groups. And, you know, we know that it's going to be you and me next if we don't stop it now. So thank you very much, and look for that October 4th webinar by the Missouri Green Party in the comments.
Okay, thank you, Daniel. That's the end of our comment session. Now we will start questions and answers. And if you want to ask a question, please electronically raise your hand by using the hand raise emoji at the bottom of your screen by clicking on the small hand in the reactions section of the Zoom software. Also, you can raise your real hand, and I'm not sure that we can watch everybody because we've got more than one page of pictures here. So we'll try, but best to use the electronic hand raising function. Also, I will call on people who have not spoken at all before I call on any person who has already spoken if there are multiple questions to be asked here. So, and please keep your questions and answers if they're directed at a speaker to under 2 minutes. So I see we've got two hands up here already. And Scott Addison has had his hand up for quite a while. So Scott, did you have a question?
Good evening. Thanks for pulling this off. I wanted to offer a little side commentary and a resource on some research that we've been doing. I'm with a little organization called PCU Free Assembly Project. Been around about 30 years, dealing with the remote exotic problems of the rainbow gatherings in the national forests. And that's not to be confused with later monikers that came from Jesse Jackson's Rainbow Coalition or the LGT, you know, connections with that later on. The rainbow gatherings began as a prayer for peace on July 4th, 1972. They've gone to national forests and relied on the use of that traditional public forum for a ongoing experiment in social ecology and consensual democracy and expressive freedom, the right of assembly, of people to voluntarily cooperate in assembly and bring together different kinds of speech. And we've been dealing with constitutional challenges that are really unknown and not well understood anywhere else in the civil liberties community around the personal right to assemble and how regulations have been enacted to basically criminalize voluntary assembly. And this harkens to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Article 20. Eleanor Roosevelt, in her great wisdom, made sure that we had two parts. There was that thing, I can read it, but I'll just say it. Basically, you have a right to assemble and peaceably, and no one may be compelled to be a member of a group and an organization or association is the word. And this is really key because it sees that, we have a personal right to join, and if we do not constitute some kind of legal entity by virtue of standing together, there's no way to comply under special use regulations. So that's been ongoing. We started up a genre of First Amendment law around police roadblocks on First Amendment events. I was personally involved in cranking that up, and starting in 1995 and 96, we have federal court rulings that say that such practices are unconstitutional, but federal cops keep doing it. And so,
Excuse me, Scott, your time, your 2 minutes is up. If you want to finish your thought.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I thought it was 3. I'll be done in 20 seconds. The other thing, and I'm going to put a screen up really briefly, was about the fact that we've been documenting how they've been using the pretext of emergency management and declaring an emergency around speech in order to basically trigger a delegation of authority to police over all matters of policy. And this is a really dangerous trend. It's also manifested locally. That's what's behind what took down the Occupies and behind the Ferguson repressions was an incident management structure that basically put full policy control in the hands of the cops. I have a link in the chat about this. When people save the chat, you can find that. I'd be happy to talk to you. But we're trying to do outreach with an issue that's not well understood. We're trying to speak to the civil liberties community now and get some attention to this because it affects everybody. I'm sorry it took so long, but thanks for your time.
Okay. Holly, did you had your hand up?
I did. I was going to, sorry. I was just going to let you know I could help with, I was going to try to help with tracking hands and stuff, but it looks like you have it under control. So that's.
Oh, okay. All right. Thanks, Holly. All right, Dave, is it Mulinix?
Yeah, it's French. It's Moulinex at one point, now it's Mulinix. Everything gets bastardized in the United States. I just wanted to relate that, the whole story about you throw the pebble in the pond and you don't know how far the rings go out. And I just want to thank our dear sister, Kiana, and her work on Cop City. You helped us. And we were able to kill it because of your efforts. We saw through what was going on there, and that helped us organize our campaign, and we successfully did it. So you haven't killed it there, but you helped us kill it here. I just want to thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any other questions for anybody here? So, no? Okay. Well, it's time for us to close, and I have just a pertinent quote here from Thomas Jefferson that I would like to leave you with. He says, "The will of the people is the only legitimate foundation of any government, and to protect its free expression should be our first object." So, end quote. And unfortunately, our free expression is being systematically eroded. So I thank everyone for attending and wish you all a good night.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Thanks, everybody.
Ooh, save the chat.
Thanks, folks.
Yes, and let me
Thanks
save the
to
chat.
GPAF.
I want to save the
That
chat.
will be saved. It'll be saved with the rest of the call.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Oh,
Holly.
okay.
Thank you,
All right.
Rita.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Chris.
I'll close the
don't-
Thank you, all the speakers. Bye-bye.